everyone. Welcome back to the American Experiment podcast. My name is Grace Keating. As always, I am here with Kathryn Hinderocker.
Hello.
And we are joined once again by Bill Walsh.
I want my middle name to be Bill Stop the Tape Walsh.
By Bill Stop the Tape. We can arrange that.
All right, let's do it.
We can arrange that. Bill Stop the Tape Walsh.
All right.
How are you guys feeling today?
Caffeinated.
I'm a little sleepy. Everyone else had a lot of caffeine, and I opted for a water. I don't know why.
A lot of caffeine this morning at the
Not
big
enough
headquarters.
caffeine.
A lot of caffeine, a lot of feelings, a lot of anger on this side of the table. I hate these clips. We're back for another episode of Stop the Tape, and I got pretty riled up watching these. There was a lot of loud groans coming from my office as I was watching these. So I don't know. Let's dive right in.
Roll them. And I don't have to say anything then.
Yeah.
You guys are going to react. This is going to be great.
I think the theme of the day is nonsense at the legislature and then nonsense in the education system. That's what I'm titling this segment of the podcast. Oh, by the way, we have a back half today. Kathryn and I sit down with Senator Michael Kreun today and talk about what's going on at the legislature. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, it was a great interview. He came in studio and sat down with us for a while. It was awesome. So yeah, stick around.
Mm-hmm.
Let's jump right in. For the nonsense at the legislature portion, we are watching a debate on the ethnic studies mandate that's at the Capitol. Just absurd and really quite frustrating. Bill, any context you want to give us?
Sure. I mean, the legislature in 2023 in their off the cliff session put in place this new ethnic studies rule. Ethnic studies has to be offered to every kid in high school in the state of Minnesota. And then there's a lot of information on what ethnic studies means, and
because it sounds very nice,
right? And we talk a lot. We're going to talk a little bit about bait and switch. It's like, oh, this is a study of cultures, and no, it's not. It's very political. It's separating kids by power structures. We've written a lot about it here. We have a campaign running even today, radicalrepeal.com, to repeal the ethnic studies mandate. School districts across the state are not happy with this because of the cost of implementing this. Embedding ethnic studies throughout all subjects, all standards, ethnic studies in math, ethnic studies in gym, all grades, asking kindergartners to separate themselves by power structures and figure out who the winners and the losers are by race. Very damaging stuff, and obviously not on task to teach math and reading. And as we'll repeat many times, 50% of the kids in Minnesota cannot read at grade level or do math at grade level. But we are really going to, spend time in ethnic studies.
Yeah, so we got to make sure a first grader can explin what a power construct is.
Right. And that they are an oppressor or oppressed as a first grader.
And we're making light of this. This is the law. This is in the law. Read the law is one of our themes here today. Senator Lucero read the law and has an amendment to a K-12 education bill on the floor of the Senate. This is actually on April 24th. We're a little bit late getting to it, but where he takes this section out of the law, and then Democrats, of course, defend it. So I think we can do Lucero first to get a little positive vibe going, right? So let's do this is Lucero, Senator Lucero offering his amendment and explaining a little bit about how ethnic studies got into law, and then we'll go from there.
So what is ethnic studies? Ethnic studies means an anti-American, anti-free enterprise, anti-Semitic, racist propaganda. Why do I say that? Well, Governor Walz appointed Brian Lazinski to the committee that is writing the official implementation framework that will dictate ethnic studies curriculum for all Minnesota public schools. In a video that Lazinski posted on YouTube on May 27th of 2022, he states, the first tenet of critical race theory is that the United States as constructed is irreversibly racist.
All right, stop the tape there. So that's a good setup. He had more to say about ethnic studies and why it should be removed from law. But the main point he's making is a point we've made many times, that this Brian Lazinski was put in charge of the ethnic studies framework and is the architect of this on behalf of Tim Walz. This is Tim Walz's guy. And then we've got this video where he basically says, America needs to be deconstructed and the roots of America and culture need to be pulled out. And that's what we need to do. And he's the one in charge of this. And it's reflected in the document. He was very successful in getting his view in there. So amendment, take it out. Here is your K-12 education chair. I'm setting up the next clip now, right? Cwodzinski from Eden Prairie.
Yes.
Defending.
That's not how I would have thought you pronounced that last name, just for the record.
Yeah.
CWOD.
Cwodzinski.
Cwodzinski. I kind of like that.
Yes.
From a Hinterrocker to a Cwodzinski.
Yep.
With a C.
So he, just for his little setup, Senator Cwodzinski taught history, government in the Eden whole career, and then ran for the Senate. And so he'll bring that. I think he'll remind us of that on the floor. He does that frequently, and he's now chairing this committee. So here's his defense of ethnic studies.
So many of our kids say, I'm not interested in history because it's not my story. It's not my family's story. And I'll be the first to say, throughout my teaching career, I love the American story. I love everything about it. All the great things and all the warts and bad things we did.
All right, stop the tape there, Isaac. Stop the tape. I know we didn't plan this.
What an odd thing to say.
No, that's a great talking point that they use. It's like, oh, we just want to teach history, warts and all.
Yeah.
We want to teach about America's experience with slavery and how bad that was. And that's how they're trying to defend ethnic studies by saying that's what it is.
Yeah, as though our kids are not already being taught about slavery and the way Native Americans were treated. They're already getting that. I was not, in school. I was in school not long ago.
Yeah,
our kids are getting this already, but they like to pretend as though we live in a racist state that hasn't been teaching our kids that stuff. And it's just not true. And that's the bait and switch of this. And also, I'm sorry, just the way he says that is absolutely hilarious. He's like, I love all of American history. I love slavery. I love that. I feel like I could have worded that a little bit better. I don't know. Anyway.
All right, we should let him finish. I don't know if it gets better or not, but.
And so with that said, I think it's important that our kids get a wide array of history and so that when they take a class, they get a little bit of HERSTORY with the history, and they learn all about the people that maybe when I went through school, I had no idea what their story was.
Did a legislator just say HERSTORY?
that hurt. That hurt my soul. Like the cringe in me. I can't even sit here. That's so uncomfortable.
I have, so much secondhand embarrassment for him right now.
I'm sorry. As if women have a separate HERSTORY from what exists in American history. No one's arguing that we shouldn't be teaching the entire history of America. No one is arguing that we shouldn't be doing that. In fact, that is what we're doing. That's not what this bill says at all. And to say that women are not being taught about, completely untrue. To say that we need some sort of special treatment in the way you're handling children in teaching them a HERSTORY, offensive.
Yeah, and so insulting to the teachers who have been teaching for decades in our school system. You think that until now, all of the teachers in your state of Minnesota have just been omitting the parts of history that
we're a little
uncomfortable, that have women in it. I don't know. That seems like a lot of history.
Yeah,
to me. Seems like it'd be kind of hard to just cut out all the female names in every lesson you're teaching.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because I think we have the clips out of order a little bit for our show, but Lucero introduced the amendment and gave a pretty brief explanation, saying, look, this is bad. It's an unfunded mandate. Districts don't want it. We should get rid of it. And then you saw Cwodzinski defend it. And then out of order, Lucero came back and said, that's not what ethnic studies is. And the clip we ran earlier where he talks about Cwodzinski and everything else. And so got him a little bit out of order. But now we get the next response from Senator Erin Maye Quade from Apple Valley. And I think there's a couple things here that she does that are, well, one for sure that is the impetus for this Stop the Tape episode. You'll see
some really incredible moments in this, guys. So gear up.
Yeah, gear up for Erin Maye Quade.
Briefly.
Thank you, Mr. President. How does one follow that? How does one follow that?
Speak.
I might follow it with the actual definition in Minnesota State statute of what ethnic studies is, which is the interdisciplinary study of race, ethnicity, and indigeneity with a focus on the experiences and perspectives of people of color.
All right, stop the tape. Stop the tape.
Bill, was that the full definition?
She just read the first sentence of the definition of ethnic studies in law. And she said the word actually. She said, well, we should just actually look at the actual definition of ethnic studies, which she did read the first line. The second line in the definition of ethnic studies is more to Lucero's point. Ethnic studies analyzes the ways in which race and racism have been and continue to be social, cultural, and political forces, and the connection of race to the stratification of other groups, including stratification based on the protected classes under Section 363A.13. So she leaves out the second half of the definition, which instructs schools to separate kids based on race, using politics and bringing politics into the classroom. She just leaves that out.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder, is there something you weren't proud of in that second half of the definition?
So it's just completely intellectually dishonest from Senator Maye Quade to try to argue the definition of races or definition of ethnic studies and then not even read the entire definition. So that's outrageous. Then she goes on to make another point here.
Quite controversial if you are trying to resegregate society. Quite controversial if you're trying to overturn the Civil Rights Act, if you're trying to make it illegal to be black.
Wow.
Disappear a whole bunch of black and brown people from the country. Not controversial if you want to live in a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. But when we include the perspectives of people of color, when we include the people who live in our state, right?
Right.
We actually learn better and we learn more. It is very, very pro-American to do that. So vote no on this amendment. We can move on from this.
Okay, so stop the tape. No one disagrees with that second half of what she said there. You know, the views and viewpoints of multitudes of races that live in Minnesota and communities that live in Minnesota. That's the bait and switch. She's ignoring the political parts and the divisiveness of the statute, which is in law, and just talking about, oh, this is just about getting more perspectives into the curriculum. That's all it is. And that doesn't even get to the first part of her thing, but you guys can react to where we're going to erase people.
We're going to resegregate the country? Yeah. I'm sorry, can a sitting legislator not get sued for just lying, just slander? She's saying that's what Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to resegregate the country.
That's the thing, like, name names. Who is doing that?
She can just say whatever she wants.
Who is doing that? Tell us. We will say, no. I would come out against anyone trying to make being black illegal? Yeah. Is that what she said?
Like, that's a new proposal. I missed it.
No. Say who. It's not, because of course it's not real. Yeah. She's making it up to scare people and then says a complete lie about what the meaning of ethnic studies is about. Of course, all we want with ethnic studies is to love each other and be
study cultures, foods and clothing that they wear, and yeah,
which is hilarious because there's quotes out there of these same people who developed the ethnic studies curriculum saying, like, that is not what it is. It's not just about studying cultures. It's not about learning about other foods.
That's in the framework.
They literally say it's not that. Yeah,
they say exactly that. This is not about the study of cultures. It is more.
Yeah.
So believe what they're saying. Believe what's in the documents. Believe what school districts are going to have to deal with when this is foisted on this year. Don't believe what you hear from the floor from Senator Cwodzinski and Senator Erin Maye Quade.
It's so frustrating too, the way she adds at the end, we can move on from this. Stop wasting our time with this absurd objection to this utter arrogance, this very racist and divisive, ideology that we're pushing on our K through 12 students. Just move on.
People like her are only given power by their lies. Like, it's just so frustrating to see some of these people. And that's not to say all people on the left even, or people in the legislature that are all Democrats. I don't think everyone's in this boat where their power lies in their constituents and people in Minnesota believing the lies that they tell them. Seriously, to have people have power based off that kind of false, like, structure, they're feeding lies, it's just so frustrating, And so I feel like hopefully people wake up to that and see that what she's saying is not true.
She represents your hometown.
I know. She's had her sights set on this career too her whole life, It's frustrating to see.
That's gotta hurt. Well, let's transition into the second segment of this. This is titled Nonsense in Our School Boards in the Education System. The clip we're about to play is from an Osseo area school board meeting about a year ago in March 2024. Bill, give us some context. Why are we watching this?
Well, we're watching it because it's a real life example in living color of the Circle of Education Funding. And if you haven't checked into the Circle of Education Funding, we've got a post on this and a little video on it. But in essence, the Circle of Education Funding explains kind of how K-12 money works its way through the system. And I'll just do it quickly. The legislature appropriates money to K-12 schools, and they do it because, oh my gosh, we got to put more money in schools. And then the money goes to school districts. The unions know exactly how much money their school district got because they can see it. It's public. And then they go negotiate a contract with the teachers union mainly. And 75% of the budget is decided in that one single vote. And we're going to see a vote in real life. And then later, by the way, into it, they give teachers more than they can afford. They put themselves into bankruptcy or statutory operating debt. They have to raise taxes to cover it. There's no accounting for that. But that vote is done. And then later on, they realize, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money to run our school district. And so we cut things like middle school band, or we raise fees for the football program.
It's always like the kids will have to walk miles to school.
We won't have a school nurse anymore.
Yeah, right.
Or in this case, we cut mental health staffers. And we're going to get to this in this part of this circle of education funding. And then what happens in communities like Osseo? We need more money for these mental health staffers that we've lost. We got to go to the legislature and ask for more money. And then it goes around in a circle and it goes around. So
and the taxpayers are sitting there like, didn't we just approve more money like last year?
Yep. So that's the circle of education funding. And I just thought this is a perfect example of it. We can watch it in real life. So I don't know, the setup is that we're at different points of the circle, but we're going to go back in time to the moment where they gave away the entire budget to the teachers union in a contract that they couldn't afford. So we can start and we should just roll it without comment until we're done.
Who is the person speaking again, though?
So this is the school board chair. I don't even know her name. She's running the school board meeting, and they're taking the vote to approve the teacher contract for the next 2 years. This is a year ago in 2024. They're approving. Now this is encumbering about 75% of the entire school budget because schools are about people, and they pay teachers. That's mainly what we do with schools. So this is one vote that sets them up their entire budget, and you can just see the attitude as it's happening.
Let's roll it.
Again, thank you to our teachers. I know of all people how hard we work, and
she's a teacher.
It's getting harder every single year. So again, thank you for working through this bargaining process, working with us, and doing the work that you do. It's imperative for our scholars. But again, thank you.
I love you. And then we clap. Oh boy! Circle clap, jazz hands. All right, stop the tape. Stop the tape. So you got jazz hand. The Tim Walls jazz
For our
hands.
listening audience, there was there was a heart, a hand heart.
The hand heart, the circle clap.
The round of applause where you move your hands in a circle. I didn't see any snaps.
We're
I
very,
was
very
expecting some
excited
snaps.
to reward the teachers union with the new contract. The contract was 6% increase in the first year, 3% increase in the second year for all teachers. And of course, they're in a steps and lanes pay structure. So they go another year, they move over one, get more money, then they get a 6% on top of that. If they get a master's degree, they move up one, get 6% on top of that. So the contract cost the district millions of dollars in new funding. But just the reaction and the giddiness, and then the other part being that she's actually by profession a teacher, and also on the school board. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know, probably not teaching in the Osseo school district. That would really be a conflict, but it's absolutely a conflict that these school boards across the Twin Cities especially are populated by teachers.
Yeah, I can't believe that's
so they're
allowed.
on both sides of the bargaining
Right.
table.
I mean, we literally, Senator Michael Kreun served on a school board for years. So we're interviewing the second half of this podcast. He was just a regular citizen who walked in and wanted to take an interest in his children's education. That's what I expect when I think of school boards.
Yeah, because even if you're a teacher in another district, you're likely a union member, right? So conflict.
Now, voters put them there. I mean, it's not like, I don't think it should be illegal for a teacher to serve on a school board. I'm just saying this is a really interesting, poor choice by voters to put teachers on the school board to negotiate the number one decision they made, the most important decision they make. You're seeing them, they're going to take the vote here in a second. I think they took the vote and they clapped about it. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. They are going to take the vote. Number one decision, most money spent, and you've got teachers on both sides of the bargaining table. Guess how it's going to go, obviously. So,
and the kind of the arrogance or whatever of being like, I love you, thank you for the more money, thank you for me, for we, the teachers, more money for me. It's
Sadly,
very
when
it's taxpayer money.
It gets worse when we roll the tape. I'm sorry, but it's just maybe we should roll it.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Oh, we're so happy. Yay. Giggle, giggle, giggle.
President Burrows.
president, teachers union president.
Motion passes 6-0 because I'm counting Tanisha.
I'm counting Tanisha. So stop the tape. Stop the tape.
Who's Tanisha?
The union president. So we jokingly, that was a joke, but just the attitude of that joke is that there's 5 members on the board, and she said motion passes 6-0 because I'm counting somebody, the union president. So we're counting, and you might as well let the union president vote on the contract that gives them all a raise and bankrupts the district because they're that engraved in the process. So
it's frustrating because they're not supposed to be. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding when I think of a school board is you're representing the people, you're representing the taxpayers, you're not representing the teachers. That's not their role. They're negotiating this contract with the teachers union or with the teachers to raise salaries on behalf of the public. And it doesn't feel like they are representing and fighting for the public.
And the students who are struggling to read or do well in school, they have no representation. It's been completely stolen from them by the teachers. All the teachers have this representation in the union or, in they're bargaining for their side, but the students don't get any say or representation.
No. So last chapter in this I told you about the Circle of Education funding. That was last year. The reason we brought this clip up and went back and found that is that this April, here's a headline, Osseo area schools to cut 5 mental health staffers. So guess what? They can't afford to keep mental health staffers on campuses because of that decision that you made, that you saw with their giddy laughing and everything. And they had a referendum in the district to fund mental health staffers at schools, and they're not even able to honor that vote of the citizens because they voted for a teacher contract settlement that they cannot afford. It's a real life, in living color example of the Circle of Education funding, and we see these every day. We thought we'd just point one out and stop the tape.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and if you zoom out one more, it's an example of how we see policy that feels really good, sounds good, you're circle clapping, you're hearting because we love teachers. We do. We want to give teachers all the money in the world if we could. Some of these teachers are putting up with a lot. So, you want to give them more money, but you have to look at the consequences of policy and take those into account. It's at every level, liberals, Democrats, things that sound good is what they try and get past, but you have to look at what really happens in reality.
That's exactly what I was going to say. They wanted to pay their teachers more, which I think honestly is one of the most popular issues today in America, is we think teachers should be paid more. And they did that at the expense of these other teachers' jobs. And so few people connect the dots.
Connect the dots.
In that circle of education funding. And then the other interesting element of this is some of the positions, I think all of the positions that were cut were temporary positions that were funded by COVID funds, and just is another case of people of districts and local governments using one-time COVID funding to build up their infrastructure, knowing those funds are not going to be there forever. And now here's the painful part where we have to pull back, and it hurts. But that's what happens.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is this cutting of the staffers gets the news and makes the paper. And people go to the school board meeting. They're very upset about that. There was not very many people at the other meeting we just watched where they made the single biggest decision of the entire 2-year cycle. We got to flip the script so that more people show up at that meeting when all that money is being spent and not this one.
Well, that's good to know.
Wow. That was a very upsetting, very frustrating episode. Any final thoughts on those clips, guys?
No.
All right. Well, on that note,
it speaks for itself.
No, it really does.
Don't worry, because our interview with Senator Kreun was really good.
Really much more enjoyable, I would say. So stick around for
fast
that.
Forward.
Yeah, fast forward a little bit. We'll see ya.
American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you.
Senator Michael Kreun, thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you in studio.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
In our little closet studio. It's very close in this corner back here, but it's fun. We get to know each other.
Very nice studio.
We did find you a Minnesota's Think Tank mug also, so
Appreciate
getting
it.
some important branding in there.
Yeah.
We're really quite professional here, as you guys know.
Well, let's start out by getting to know you a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the Minnesota Senate.
Well, I grew up in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, moved down to the Twin Cities after law school, and settled in Blaine shortly after that. I've been there for 23, 24 years now. Been a practicing lawyer for my entire career. Got into politics around 2016. Always been following it, always interested in it. Ran for school board when my kids started going to school. Back before it was cool for conservatives to run for school board. And you know, before that, I never really thought that I had enough time to really get involved in politics. But as things went, I enjoyed being on the school board. I thought I was good at it and got more and more involved. And then in 2019, I went from real estate litigation and private practice to an in-house corporate lawyer position, which is more like a 40-hour-a-week position. So all of a sudden I had a little bit more time. And when redistricting happened, I looked at my district and thought, here's the opportunity. And so I decided to run for Senate in February 2022, and it's been full steam ahead ever since.
You touched on it briefly that it's not always been cool for conservatives to run, for school board. What was that landscape like when you first entered? Were there any big surprises? Were you surprised by the culture you found there? Tell me about that.
Well, I'm in the Spring Lake Park School District, I live in the city of Blaine, but in the Spring Lake Park School District. And I would say it's a very diverse and what you would now call a purple school district. And I knew that going in, and so I didn't know exactly what to expect. But and I was kind of an outsider. I wasn't super involved in the kind of the district things. I was a youth sports coach and things like that. But so I don't think people really knew me. I think they were a little nervous. They heard I was a Republican. And but ultimately, it was about building relationships with those board members and basically saying, I'm not going to be the first to go political, but if you all go political, then I will as well. And really we've never really had a problem after that. It was about finding common ground, moving forward together, listening to each other. So my experience has been quite a bit different than a lot of people on the school board. But it did get a little dicey around COVID and the school shutdowns and the mask mandates. So a lot of those things came, but I think we navigated it pretty well.
Yeah, I feel like you hear a lot about people on school boards. The Democrats or, liberals will accuse people on the right of making things political when it started way before then, when you're putting books in our schools that are clearly starting a political conversation. It's the conservative reaction, and then they blame conservatives for going political.
Yeah, and my strategy too was it wasn't like a clear, these are the Democrats, these are the Republicans. There were some people there that were very reasonable, kind of middle of the road. And I did a lot of my work behind the scenes. That's kind of how I operate. And I would say things like, I don't really want to bring this up at a school board meeting, but I'm having some difficulties with this. And then we just worked through it, and we had some good people. And so it wasn't as exciting to an outsider to look at school board meetings I was a part of, but there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes.
That's okay. I feel like that's preferred,
I think that's what the generally.
Okay, can I ask a Blaine related question? Because
Sure.
I have a brother who lives in Blaine, and he loves Blaine. He's always talking about everything great that's happening in Blaine.
I met him door knocking, by the way.
That is so funny. Yes, I asked if he knew you, and he was like, "Oh yeah, he's door knocked at our house a couple of times. Great guy." I was like, "Wow, what a ringing endorsement!"
I gotta ask my uncle. He's in Blaine too. You
Actually,
know everyone.
come into your house and talk to you. That's amazing. So, but you said you've lived there for 20 so years. How have you seen Blaine and that area change in that time?
Oh, wow, Blaine has changed a lot. I moved there in spring of 2002. I lived on the western side of Blaine at the time, and I remember driving up Highway 65, which is very famous in Blaine, and thinking, man, they really need to fix this road. And this was back in 2002. And it's just been, development after development after development. And it's and that road has really been a problem. And that's another reason why I decided to run for Senate. I'm like, what are they spending the transportation dollars on St. Paul?
What a good question.
This road is a disaster, and it's been this way for decades. Like I identified over 20 years ago they needed to redo it. And so I made that one of my top priorities, was to get funding for Highway 65 in Blaine. But the community itself is fantastic. It's been growing like crazy. There's some growing pains, Highway 65 and some other things. A very diverse community, a lot of immigrants moving particularly into northern Blaine, into some of those new developments. And so I think it's a fantastic district, a great opportunity for Republicans and somebody like me to go out and do some outreach and make some connections with people that maybe don't normally associate with Republicans. And I think I've been really effective at that. But yeah, it's a great community, and that's why people want to move there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about what's going on now. You recently brought an ethics charge against Senator Bobby Joe Champion. We haven't talked about this yet on the podcast, so people might know a little bit, but let's start at the beginning. What was the ethics complaint that you filed?
So Senator Champion, who's the president of the Senate, and he's the chair of the Jobs Committee, which is important, he brought forth a bill back in 2023, which was a direct appropriation, sometimes what we call an earmark, that would have sent $3 million, taxpayer dollars, directly to this nonprofit in North Minneapolis. What we didn't know at the time, and what we since learned, which is the basis of the ethics complaint, was that was his legal client. Bobby Joe Champion is a lawyer. And at the time he introduced that bill in 2023, and at the time he presented it to the Jobs Committee, his own Jobs Committee, he was their lawyer. He had represented them in some lawsuits, some foreclosure lawsuits, where his client fell behind on loan payments and they were foreclosing their properties. And he didn't disclose that he was their lawyer. He didn't disclose any of these lawsuits. And the bill, he included it in his omnibus bill, which he's in charge of that as the chair. Presented his omnibus bill, presented his bill on the Senate floor, never disclosed at any point to anybody that he was the lawyer for this group or any of the litigation. And so it got funded, it passed, governor signed it, this nonprofit got the money and went on. He did the same thing again this year in 2025, brought a bill and presented it to committee, didn't disclose it. And then news reports came out about his relationship, and that's when we brought the complaint.
So it took this long for people to learn that this was, because this is 2023. 2023, he did this the first time, and the ethics complaint was only filed very recently, right?
Yep, very recently, about a month ago, when it came out in the news, and we decided to file the complaint, and I was the chief author of that complaint and presented it to the ethics committee yesterday.
So it's not as though he like came clean and said, I've got something to tell you guys. They were actually a legal client of mine. Someone else found this out about him.
Well, funny story there. Once the news reports came out, right away that Monday morning, he filed a petition for what's called an advisory opinion to the ethics committee, asking for, an advisory opinion whether he violated any Senate rules. And then we put out our complaint a few days later. The reason for that is he wanted to have an opportunity to present his defense without any opposition to the ethics committee before we had a chance to present our ethics complaint. And so that's what he did. And he got an advisory opinion before we even got to present our complaint, which said he did not violate the conflict of interest rule because he wasn't paid for his legal services. He's claiming they were pro bono, which we really have no way of knowing. But that's what he claimed. And so they said, but in the future, you really should disclose potential or appearances of conflict of interest. And that was the backdrop for yesterday when I presented the ethics complaint to the committee.
Well, and we were just talking about this on the podcast about there's this difference between, okay, did you break a law? Did you break a rule? But there's also just propriety and ethics. And I mean, as a voter in Minneapolis, wouldn't you see this and say, gosh, this guy clearly has very low integrity. He didn't see anything wrong with this relationship. I'm not going to vote for him again. It's going to happen. But I think we were just saying this. We place too much of an emphasis on black and white. Did he break a rule?
Yep.
Right.
And he specifically said, I did not need to disclose, and I'm not going to disclose unless I absolutely have an obligation to do it. That was basically what he said. There was no financial incentive for me. Therefore, I didn't need to disclose. Our point was that there are other rules that are applicable here, which, when you violate the public trust, that is a violation of Senate rules. That was a basis for our complaint. When you put yourself in a position where your judgment is impaired, that's a violation of our ethics code in the Senate, which also is a violation of ethics rules. How can you have an independence of judgment on a bill when you are that client, you're their lawyer?
Yeah.
How can you be independent in that situation? It's impossible.
Yeah.
Especially without disclosing it.
Yeah, and I mentioned last week on the podcast, when you're a lawyer, this is like a big deal. They're always talking about the ethics. You go through these classes. I have a fiance who just went through law school not too long ago. You do the whole class on the ethics of being a lawyer. And I was like, wow, I had no idea it was so intense. But those conflict of interest situations are extremely important. They do not want to have a conflict of interest. So maybe at one time I would have said like, well, who cares if someone didn't break the law? Why would they be held to a higher standard if they're in elected office? But I think now knowing what I do about other professions that have higher standards because they're dealing with sensitive issues or vulnerable people or different variables, maybe our legislature and the people there should be held to a higher standard.
Right. And the lawyer's rules of professional conduct did come into play because my position was you have certain ethical obligations to your client as a lawyer that are in direct conflict with your obligations as a senator. And that put him in a spot where he shouldn't have been carrying the bill in the first place. But at a minimum, if he was going to do it, what he had to have done is get permission from his client to talk about the lawsuits, to talk about his representation, and then go and disclose it and then answer any questions that comes his way truthfully and honestly. That would have been his only path forward. I don't, you'll have to ask him why he chose not to, but I'll just say that if he had disclosed it, then these lawsuits would have been front and center in committee and would have painted his client in a bad light. And it might have jeopardized his client's ability to get that $3 million of taxpayer money. And so maybe that's why he didn't disclose it. But either way, it's not a good look. We as legislators, the members on the Jobs Committee, the Senate as a whole had a right to know that the proposed nonprofit that was going to get $3 million of taxpayer, but just got done with lawsuits where they were being foreclosed upon and had entered into forbearance agreements. I would think it's very highly relevant to know what the financial condition is of these nonprofits before they get taxpayer money, if we should be doing these earmarks at all, which we probably shouldn't be.
Great question.
Fair point.
Right.
Very fair point. So now the ethics committee already voted on this complaint, right? And it failed 2-2.
Yeah, the result was very predictable. It was partisan because there's 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats on the ethics committee.
It's so sad that we just have to accept that. It was split down party lines and, well, that's just how it is. But this is exactly what happened in the Senate burglar case too with Nicole Mitchell. It was a party line vote. This is going to sound
By the way, if the line is like breaking the law, he didn't do anything, bro. Why did she? And she's voting for herself?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Did they all just get to vote in their own issues?
Is there any hope of us ever having an ethics complaint that doesn't go through on party lines? I mean, is there just no integrity left at all?
It does appear that way. I don't know. I remain hopeful. The ethics committee used to not be so partisan. And in fact, I cited an advisory opinion from 2010 that was, similar to the facts of this case, where they did at least admonish the senator for failure to disclosing some things that he should have disclosed. And I used that. Of course, that was a different era back in 2010. And didn't work out that way this year. But I think it was an important effort anyway. Even knowing what the end result was going to be when we started, it was still important to let people know that we're still fighting for integrity. We're still trying to hold our members accountable. And I think the public wanted to see that. So I'm glad I did it, even though I knew the result was going to be 2-2 at the end of the day.
Yeah, and staying on the issue for a second of that nonprofit funding, I think it's something that a lot of conservatives are talking about right now. And for me, seems like clearly an opportunity for fraud. I mean, are there systems in place so that this wouldn't happen in the future? Is it just up to the senator or representative to self-disclose if there's any conflict? Or do you see that as a potential place that there could be fraud in the system?
I think legislatively directed appropriations are very problematic for a number of reasons, and fraud is a big one of them. The vetting that some nonprofits have to go through in the competitive bidding process just isn't there. If the legislature directs the government to appropriate to this specific entity, then that's what happens. And so you're right. It's really up to senators and representatives to kind of disclose what they know about these nonprofits, but sometimes they may not even know. So in this case, Bobby Joe Champion should have disclosed it, but there may be situations where the legislator proposing it isn't aware of the facts. And so it's just one of those things where we need to at least scale back, if not outright prohibit the use of that. That would take a change of Senate rules and House rules to accomplish that, or maybe a statute. And I know there are some people working on it, but definitely something we need to be discussing going forward.
I also asked Representative Kristen Robbins this question, but maybe you would consider putting Center of the American Experiment in there as just next time. We've never gotten one of those little fun.
Yeah. I'd have to vet you guys pretty good before we do that.
In the spirit of vetting, you proposed establishing an Office of Inspector General to look into, I believe, Minnesota's rampant fraud issues.
Right.
Tell us about that. And can we call it Minnesota Doge?
Well, we'll worry about the naming after the bill passes. Not sure the Democrats would go for that if that were the title.
Very triggering to them. I don't really get it. Like the cutting of government waste is got them really up in arms. Like
government efficiency is really not in their vocab. So
yeah, the Office of Inspector General bill is actually, in these days of highly partisan legislating, this is an exception where it has been a very bipartisan approach that I've been working with Senator Heather Gustafson on this in the Senate and other members as well. There's been several members from our caucus and the Senate Republican caucus that have been involved. We've had bicameral discussions with the House and House Republicans and House Democrats. So it'd be a centralized office that would take some of the embedded inspector generals out of the agencies where right now they answer to the commissioners and put them under a central office whose sole mission would be to investigate fraud throughout our state government, wherever it is.
So really shifting people around, not necessarily creating new positions.
Well, it would create new positions.
It would.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, to people who to me, that sounds like maybe you're growing government. Is that right? What's your argument?
That would be, some people have said that the fiscal note on this, I think, is only about $8.5 million to get it started. And if this works as we anticipate, it will save way more money than $8.5 million. So I think in the end, this will be a huge benefit to taxpayers, even though it will cost a little bit of money just to get the office off the ground.
Well, that's something that's interesting to me that I didn't know before, doing this podcast and things like that. There are like 100 auditors. I feel like I vote for an auditor and I don't even but these people no one's really covering the legislature. No one's covering the state agencies. It's like there are so many auditors, but no one's really focused on certain things. So I do feel like it sounds like there's a gap that needs to be filled based on what we've seen with Feeding Our Future, et cetera.
Yeah, we have the Office of Legislative Auditor, which does really good work, but it doesn't have a lot of teeth. It can just really make recommendations, which, oftentimes aren't followed. So this would be more, looking at systems and the OLA is systems. This would be looking at beneficiaries, providers, individual investigative cases, and then having some teeth and some power to actually stop it and do something about it. So it's a little bit different focus than the OLA. So we're hopeful, obviously the devil's in the details, as they always say, and that's where a lot of the work behind the scenes is going on right now to make sure that this office is independent as possible. And that it's not, and so the legislature is involved in the selection of the person and all those sorts of things, trying to make it bipartisan so you don't get some partisan hack in there and make this a political position. We really want this to work.
So what everyone's talking about right now, I think, is the budget. I mean, we're coming up on, May 19th is the end of session, right? I think the deadline for the budget is a little bit further out. But what do you know about what's going on in budget negotiations? And is there going to be a shutdown? Will we need a special session? Where do you see that going?
Well, the special session talk is heating up. Right now, the House, most of the action's in the House right now, honestly. And they're negotiating a lot of their final bills. And the governors get involved with budget targets. So the House had their budget targets, the Senate had their budget targets, the governor had his, and now they're trying to kind of mesh those together right now. The challenge for us in the Senate Republican caucus is we're the only minority caucus in the legislature right now. So our role is going to be a little bit later, probably. If they negotiate something over in the House that pulls away some Senate Democrats from being able to support it, then that would be an opportunity where they might need some Senate Republican votes. So we will be involved at some point to make sure that there's enough votes to pass the bills that need to be passed if they're worthy of being passed. Otherwise, we'll just be simple no's on everything, or at least I will. So we'll see how it plays out and how heavily involved the Senate Republican caucus is, but I'm looking forward to it.
One of the things I've heard some of your colleagues talk about that absolutely blows my mind is that in these negotiations, a sticking point is health care for undocumented migrants or illegal immigrants.
Right.
What have you heard about that? Is that true? Is that seriously a sticking point? That's what's going on? The Democrats want to preserve that coverage for illegal immigrants at the expense of taxpayers?
That's what they claim, and it is really unbelievable that that's where they would draw the line in the sand and say, well, you know, we can't cut here. And because there's going to have to be some cuts.
Right.
This seems like low-hanging fruit to me.
Yeah.
Especially when the projections have been so far off and so many more people have enrolled in the universal health care part of it for illegal immigrants.
I wonder why. They're just stunned. They're like,
Yeah.
we never expected this much demand.
So weird. People want free money.
Free money, and yeah, we'll be a magnet. Why not move to Minnesota?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so
that's true.
it was very predictable. I think the magnitude of how far off it was and how fast it happened surprised a lot of people. But looking back on it, it's like, of course, that's what's going to happen. And so we need to do something about this, not just to balance the budget this year, but to look long term and say, this is completely unsustainable. We can't be doing this. And by the way, it's the wrong thing to do anyway. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail at some point over there. But from what I'm hearing, this is something that they're willing to fight for, the Democrats.
I think it's such a serious misstep. I genuinely believe that if every Minnesotan knew that our budget was in shambles, it's in an utter crisis, and there were legislators out there refusing to make cuts, refusing to cut back on healthcare for undocumented Minnesotans.
You would think
there'd be an awakening.
Well,
I truly believe that. I think Minnesotans are good. I think that they're smart. I think if everyone knew that, things might change, but
keep telling yourself that.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be the optimist over here. Senator, thank you so much for joining us in studio this morning.
Yeah, thank you. It was
Any
such a
final
joy.
thoughts you want our listeners to hear from you? Any topics we didn't cover?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things going on. I spend most of my time in the Judiciary Committee doing a lot of lawyer stuff, which I love doing. I love breaking down bills line by line. Should this be a period or a comma or a semicolon?
Oh no!
I'm one of those guys.
Oh no! He recently told me there's 3 kinds of dashes. Did you know this?
I knew there were 2.
I knew there were 2. No, he tells me there's a 3rd.
Yeah.
He's like, in the blue book.
Yes.
God.
Maybe we should talk about education real quick. That's I'm on the Education Finance Committee. I've been on the school board. We need to give our schools some mandate relief, some flexibility in how they spend their money. I know that the House had a pretty decent deal worked out over there that apparently fell apart because the House Democrats walked away from it. So hopefully they can get that back on track and we can get that education bill forward that looks like the House version and not like the Senate version.
What don't you like about the Senate version?
Well, we have the unemployment mandates are crippling our schools right now. And this is for seasonal temporary workers, that under the trifecta, the Democrats made sure that their union friends were taken care of, their public sector union friends. And so they mandated all schools to pay for unemployment for their seasonal workers over the summer, which was never the case before. Well, this is incredibly expensive. And that's kind of one of the main sticking points, whether the Democrats will see the light and say, this program is unsustainable. It's too expensive. And we need to, get that money back into the classroom as best we can and help our schools out. So they negotiated something that's workable over in the House, but then the SEIU got involved. And so the House Democrats backed away. So that's kind of, as I see it, kind of the main sticking point in education. So hopefully we get that ironed out and get a win on education, help out our schools a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the harsh reality, isn't it? And that's such a fundamental difference, I think, between conservatives and liberals, is if we had unlimited funds to make everyone's lives better and always pay for unemployment and have as many, staff as we want to, then we would. And the truth of it is we don't have unlimited funds, and you have to pick and choose what you do want to take care of.
Yes.
And the reality of growing government is easy. Pulling back on it is what's hard. When you've already been giving these people this money, now you're trying to pull it back. That's extremely difficult. And that's how you see that government growth and creep into every area.
And back in 2023, I was very vocal that we shouldn't be adding this unemployment mandate because it was very clear back then that this was unsustainable. And at some point you'd have to pull it back, which is much more difficult. But you made a really good point. I mean, when you're facing a $6 billion budget deficit, you have to first acknowledge that public funds are finite. they're limited. You can't just keep going back to the well. So when you have finite public dollars, it's all about making priorities at that point. And the Democrats right now, I think they just can't make right priorities. Their priorities are just all out of whack. And so you have to get back to basics. What do Minnesotans expect us to prioritize? And, public safety and education and transportation, good roads and bridges, not light rail projects, and that's another thing in transportation. They continue to cling to light rail expansion when we have real highway needs that people expect their government to do, which is a big part of why I got involved in this. So it's about priorities, doing what Minnesotans expect, what government should be doing, what are essentials, not nice to haves, basic stuff like that. And that's what I hope how this session plays out, but we'll see.
Amen.
That is so good. I love that. Clip that, Isaac. That was so good. I love your obsession with roads because my favorite little, visual of what happens in St. Paul is that if you go to St. Paul, you can't drive on the roads. There's so many potholes.
Right.
They're terrible. The roads are awful. And I'm like, wow, they've got these huge, beautiful buildings. They're building this new one with a gorgeous balcony for the politicians to stand on. And you can't drive on the roads. It's really infuriating. So I appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back sometime and your,
absolutely.
Session wrap up or something
Absolutely.
like that.
Thanks for having me. Be happy to be back anytime.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, do all the things to help us reach more people. We will see you next week.